For pretty much all of human history, if you wanted to send a message, you either had to carry it by hand or send it down a physical wire. That was it. But then, one young guy came along and figured out how to tame the airwaves themselves. This is the story of how one man's spark, literally, connected the entire world. So, you gotta wonder, right? How exactly did we make that jump? How did we go from being tied to clunky cables to just beaming information across the planet, invisibly? Well, that's the big question we're gonna dig into. Okay, to really get this, you've got to transport yourself back in time. Picture the late 1800s. The world was connected, sure, but it was by this giant, messy spider web of telegraph wires. They stretched over mountains and were sunk to the bottom of oceans. Communication was fast, yeah, but it had a physical leash. And here's the crazy part. The idea of wireless was already out there, just floating around in the world of science. Way back in 1864, a guy named James Clerk Maxwell predicted these invisible waves existed based on nothing but math. Then, more than 20 years later, Heinrich Hertz actually proved it. He made the waves and detected them in his lab. So the science, it was totally there. But that could have been it. Story over. Science had shown these waves were real, but to Hertz and pretty much everyone else, it was just a cool lab experiment. He famously said he didn't see any practical use for it. It was like, neat trick, but so what? The world needed someone with a different kind of brain, an inventor, to see the potential. And that's where our main character enters the stage, Guglielmo Marconi. He was the young guy who looked at this cool science trick and saw something nobody else did. He saw the future. Marconi was just completely obsessed with this stuff from a young age. But he wasn't interested in just studying the theory. No way. He had a mission, a really practical one. He wanted to use these waves to send Morse code through the air, no wires needed. And this number right here, 1.5 kilometers, this is where everything changes. In 1895, messing around at his family's place in Italy, Marconi did it. He sent a wireless signal 1.5 kilometers. Now, I know, that doesn't sound very far, right? Your Wi-Fi probably goes farther. But back then, this was everything. This was the moment it went from impossible to possible. So, what was his secret sauce? How'd he pull it off? Well, he built a complete system. First, you need to make the signal. That was his spark gap transmitter. Then you got to send it out, and that's where his antenna and ground connection were key. They pushed the signal way further than anyone had before. And finally, you need to catch it. And for that, he used a nifty little device called a coherer. Okay, so here's a twist in the story. Marconi offers his amazing invention to the Italian government, and they basically said, no thanks. Big mistake. So what does a smart inventor do? He packs his bags, moves to England, a huge naval power that got the potential immediately, and gets his patent. Then he launches his own company to take this thing global. All right, so he's got the patent, he's got the company, and the tech is getting better and better. But Marconi isn't the kind of guy to just sit back. He's thinking bigger. Way, way bigger. I mean, he'd already done the impossible by sending a signal clear across the English Channel in 1899. That was a huge deal. But for a guy like Marconi, nah, that was just practice. That was just the warm-up act. So here we are, December 1901. This is the big one. This was absolutely the moonshot of its day. The goal? Forget crossing a channel. We're talking about sending a signal across the entire, massive, curved Atlantic Ocean. And you have to understand, this was a massive gamble. The signal had to travel from a powerful transmitter in Cornwall, England, all the way to a tiny windswept station in Newfoundland, Canada. Most scientists at the time were saying, no way, the Earth is round, the waves go in a straight line, they're just going to shoot off into space. Logically, it shouldn't have worked. So what message do you send to change the world? A famous quote? A line of poetry? Nope. They kept it brilliantly simple. They chose just one letter. The letter S in Morse code, 3 little dots, ... Something clear and easy to pick out from all the expected static and noise. So picture this. Marconi's there, it's freezing cold in Newfoundland. He's got this receiver pressed to his ear, probably hearing nothing but crackle and hiss for hours. And then, through all that noise, he hears it. Faint, but it's there. 3 tiny clicks. ... Success! He did it. That tiny sound had just jumped across an entire ocean. I mean, this one moment didn't just make Marconi world famous. It completely tore up the rulebook on physics and geography. It proved that global wireless communication was actually possible.
And look, this wasn't just some neat science experiment. The world didn't just pat him on the back and move on. No, the impact was huge, and it happened incredibly fast.
And if you want powerful, tragic proof of that, look no further than the Titanic, just about a decade later. When that ship was sinking, its wireless operator used Marconi's equipment to send out distress calls. And because of that wireless signal, the ship Carpathia heard the call and came to the rescue. Over 700 people were saved that night because of radio. And that was just the start of this whole revolution. All of a sudden, ships at sea weren't isolated and alone anymore. Navies and armies had a powerful new tactical tool. And of course, this laid the foundation for the next big thing, broadcasting news, music, and stories right into people's homes. So let's bring this all the way to today. Because that little spark from 1895, well, it never went out. In fact, it's basically turned into the bonfire that lights up our modern world. Marconi's first successful experiment kicked off what we call the wireless age. And guess what? We are living right in the middle of it. It's the whole idea that we can communicate and connect without being tethered to a wall. And you can draw a straight, unbroken line from what he did to what you do every day. From his first ... it evolved into public radio, then into television, then the cellular networks that completely changed society, and now the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth that we pretty much can't live without. So, here's the bottom line, the real takeaway. This isn't just history. Every single time you connect to Wi-Fi, send a text, stream a video, or pair your headphones, you are using a direct technological descendant of that gadget Marconi built over a century ago. His legacy is literally in the palm of your hand right now. Which kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about, doesn't it? In 1901, 3 simple dots, a single letter, crossed an ocean and changed human connection forever. Today, we can send almost anything, anywhere, in an instant. So it makes you wonder, what's the next message that's going to change everything?